After struggling to conceive, I gave up my corporate career to become a stay-at-home mom to my beautiful daughter. I'm learning as I go and absolutely loving it. I'm Lauren, and I am a miraculous mama.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and we have an awesome episode for you guys today. This podcast believes in empowering women through storytelling and education, and we are going to do some storytelling today because November is National Prematurity Awareness Month, and nearly 400,000 babies are born preterm each year in the United States. I will link some articles on the Instagram and Facebook page for you guys to check out on ways that you can prevent or just learn about it. Obviously, there's situations that aren't preventable, but I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring somebody on who could share her story with us. And I mean, it can be quite a scary journey if you're going through that. And I know so many of you mamas have, and we thank all of our NICU nurses and the staff who support these families through that crazy time. Before I bring Katie on, if you guys are listening and you are not subscribed, make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you can just stay up to date on all of the episodes that are coming out. Make sure to share. If you are enjoying what you're hearing, leave us a 5-star review and make sure to follow us on the Instagram page, the Twitter, which I'm still figuring out, but I think I'm starting to learn how to use it, and join our Facebook group. It's all under Miraculous Mamas. The Facebook group is absolutely amazing, and the women in there are just so supportive of each other and love on each other, and I am so grateful for all of them. The mama who's going to come on and share today, she's from our Facebook group. Her name is Katie Hamby, and she just has an awesome journey that she's going to share with us of her struggles to get pregnant and then her preterm pregnant or delivery and her journey with her babies through the NICU. So I'm going to go ahead and grab Katie. All right, everyone, I have Katie Hamby here, and she is one of our miraculous mamas. She's a part of our group, and some of you may have heard her story on the Patreon. November is also Premature Awareness Month, so thought it'd be really cool to bring on one of our moms to share their story and what they went through when it comes to having a premature baby. So thank you, Katie, so much for coming on and sharing with us.
You're welcome. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I'm just going to kind of let you take it from here.
Okay. Well, I was one of those people that struggled to get pregnant and never thought that we would be struggling. I'd always just kind of felt like I wanted to be a mom and just figured, when the time was right, we would just try and I'd get pregnant and it would just be like that. And that's not what happened. So it took us about 1.5 years. And within that time, at about the year mark, I ended up at my just OB office, and they had run some tests and were like, well, let's try you on Clomid and let's try you on Letrozole. And so I did about 4 or 5 months of all those different kinds of drugs to just try to make sure I was ovulating, and nothing seemed to work. All it really did was make my anxiety spike. So it wasn't very helpful. At about the 1.5 year mark, we decided to go see a fertility specialist because we couldn't figure out why we weren't getting pregnant. And the fertility specialist, just within one appointment, diagnosed me with PCOS. So I had gone my whole life not realizing that I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. Just from a very young age, I had always kind of had heavy periods and had gotten on birth control really early just to try to help that. And nobody had ever even mentioned that that would be something that I might have. So they put me on metformin to try to regulate my cycle. And they said it's actually a drug for people with diabetes, and it helps people who are insulin resistant, which a lot of people with PCOS are. So I decided to try it, and I felt horrible. I just was horribly sick while I was on it, especially those first few weeks. And they basically want to increase your dose until you can handle it, but it's not so uncomfortable where you just like can't go to work. And the fertility specialist basically told me, you really aren't going to be able to get pregnant on your own with PCOS. We can give you this metformin to try to help you, but we're going to need to set up an IUI, and that might even be unlikely. So we might be looking more towards IVF. And so I was just pretty devastated already, having to go to so many doctor appointments, just trying to figure out what was wrong with me and just feeling like everybody around me was getting pregnant except me. And I was just like, okay, well, I guess we just have to start saving and just pray and hope that it works. So within that same month that I started metformin, I got really sick, dropped like 15 pounds just because I just felt horrible. And I actually got pregnant that month. And it was just pretty crazy because that month was a 60-day cycle for me. They tried to confirm that I ovulated at the OBGYN office because I was still seeing them. And they said, oh, you didn't ovulate this month, like you're out. And it turns out I did. So that was kind of weird that test came back that way. Mm-hmm. Especially because it ended up where I went in at 6 weeks to go to the fertility specialist. And it turns out that I was pregnant with twins.
Yeah, so crazy.
So it's just kind of funny that the test for ovulation came back that my progesterone wasn't high enough that I had ovulated, yet I had ovulated twice.
All right, so the holidays are just around the corner, and there's one gift that thousands of moms have been calling the best gift ever. And I wanted to get my parents something that they will always cherish. And for somebody that special to you, in your life, you've got to check out the Skylight Frame. The Skylight Frame is a touchscreen photo frame that you can update instantly by email, anything from anywhere. So it's so cool. And I thought that it would be the perfect idea for my parents since all 4 of their kids live in different states. So we all have access to the Skylight Frame. We can send in photos. My brother and sisters can send in pictures of the grandkids. Vito and I can send in pictures of Hutch, and it'll automatically update to the frame. So when my mom's sitting at home, she'll be constantly getting these new photos from her family, which she would absolutely love. And I cannot wait to give it to her. I'm going to give it to her this week at Thanksgiving. And then after we get it all set up, I will show you guys how it works and what our first photos are that we chose to put on it for her. But it has a black frame and a white mat, so it looks like a real photo frame, and it adds a beautiful touch to your home. The Skylight Frame has a gorgeous 10-inch touchscreen, and you can swipe through the photos with your finger and even tap to thank the person who sent the photos. It's 100% satisfaction guaranteed, and if you don't love your Skylight, they'll offer you a full refund. You can preload it with your favorite photos for a personalized gift, and tens of thousands of families use Skylight to stay connected. And which it's such a great idea, especially for the families where you aren't at home for the holidays or you guys are all spread out. That's why I know that my mom is actually going to love it. And I will maybe try to document her opening it and share it with you guys. And now, as a special holiday offer, you can get $10 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com and enter code MAMA. That's right. To get $10 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame, just go to skylightframe.com and enter code MAMA. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com, promo code MAMA.
So anyway, from there, at our 6-week appointment, when we found out it was twins, we're pretty freaked out. We have no twins in our family, and really on either side, and had no reason to understand why we would be having twins. Come to find out, it makes sense why people with PCOS would probably be more likely to have twins, just with, polyovulation. Mm-hmm. So we went on with our pregnancy, and I just felt horrible. Like I had already gotten off the metformin feeling horrible. And I was finally at the point where I was feeling a little better. And I was so excited that I was finally pregnant and so surprised that it was twins. And then it just that first trimester, oh my gosh, like I never threw up. I'm one of those people that doesn't ever throw up. So I probably would have felt better if I did, to be honest, because I felt horrible. And with twins, I guess you have double the hormones. So I was feeling horrible, not just for like 12 weeks, but like 16 weeks. I mean, just all the way up into my second trimester, just absolutely feeling terrible. So by the time that I started to finally feel better, they had me going to maternal fetal medicine or a perinatologist. And with twins, they just want to monitor you and make sure that everything's good, because you are at a higher risk for preterm labor and a lot of other things just because you have two babies. So once a week, I was going to maternal fetal specialist and my OB every other week. And it was cool because I would get ultrasounds all the time. So I never had to worry because I could see the babies all the time. And by about 16 weeks, everything looked great. They did kind of an early anatomy scan. I didn't know really genders or anything, but they could verify that things looked okay. And by about 18 weeks, they actually went to do the anatomy scan. And I figured out that they were both girls, and I was excited and my husband was freaked out because we talked about, ideally we'd have a boy and a girl and then we could just be done. And he always wanted the boy and I always wanted the little girl, but he's like, and I said, what would be worst case scenario? And he's like, two girls. That's what it ended up being. But obviously now it's, we can't imagine it any other way. So from there, everything looked great on the anatomy scan. And she was like, oh, just before you go, like, I just want to make sure, everything's holding up with your cervix, because people with twins can start to dilate really early. And we just want to make sure. So she went to check my cervix and noticed that I was already starting to have thinning. Mm-hmm. And what they call shortening when it's that early on. Mm-hmm. So that was at about 18 weeks. And she was like, you know what, there's really nothing to worry about at this point. Like, it's just a little bit shorter than it needs to be. Some people just have naturally short cervixes. Like, we just don't know, but I do want to see you in a week. Like, we'll just kind of see how things go. I don't want to treat anything. You're not on bed rest. Like, let's just see. So I came back in a week and it had gotten a lot shorter. And there we're starting to see some bulging of the membrane, the bottom amniotic sac of baby A. So they, at that point, were like, you know what? You still have a cervix left. Let's put you on some progesterone suppositories. That can really help. And I want to see you back in a couple days. And if that's not working, we're going to have to talk about doing a cerclage pessary, which is basically just a really hard ring that they put around your cervix. And they can't stitch you shut, apparently, or they choose not to stitch you shut when you have twins, because you will dilate early just because you have twins, and it can be really, really severe tearing if you start dilating when you're stitched. So they were like, you know what, you might have to do a cerclage pessary in a few days. I came back in 2 days and she was like, there is no measurable cervix at all. The amniotic sac is basically bulging completely out. This is not good. So she, in the office, put in that cerclage pessary, which was pretty painful. And she said, I want you on basically bed rest at this point, but she said modified bed rest, just don't get out of bed, but you can go places if you need to.
All right. So I'm one of those people that I always see other people wearing a cute thing and I'm like, I could never pull that off. But recently I decided, you know what, Liz, you can pull that off and you're going to try. So I went and got these pants that I saw and that I loved, and they were from Everlane. And you know what? I rocked them and they were awesome. And I found out about Everlane because I was looking for a company that uses ethical factories, because that is such a thing, and just companies who are transparent with you. And that's what Everlane does. They only make premium essentials. They use the finest materials without traditional markups. They want you to know what you're paying for and why. So they tell you their real costs and are radically transparent about every step in their process, from the materials they use to the ethical factories, again, that they work with. No matter your style or preference, their clothes look better, cost less, and last longer. And I can attest, I'm obsessed right now with the high-waisted yellow. I know yellow is not the right color. They have like a fancy name for the color. High-waisted corduroy flare-out pants and the black turtleneck. It's such a cute outfit, and I love it. I also got Vito and I matching cotton crew t-shirts, just plain white ones. And it's so nice because they weren't outrageously expensive. You go some places and a plain white t-shirt is like $50. It's crazy. And another reason why I absolutely love supporting Everlane is that in 2018, they made a commitment to eliminate all virgin plastic from their supply chain by 2021. How cool is that? So they're actually making an impact in the world. And there are people like Angelina Jolie, The Today Show, and NPR. They all love Everlane, and it's for a reason. Go to their site, check out their products. I guarantee you're going to fall in love with something on there. And right now you can check out our personalized collection at everlane.com/mamas. Plus, you'll get free shipping on your first order. That's everlane.com/mamas. everlane.com/mamas.
So I was on modified bed rest, and I was thinking, oh, this kind of sucks. And I went back the next week hoping that things would get better, and things were just not really much better. And so at that point, she and my OB talked, and they said, you know what, any sort of activity like that you're doing, like you really need to probably stop. We need to put you on full bed rest. And if we can do anything at all, we want you in Trendelenburg, which is just basically where you're laying on your head.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So they had my dad help me incline the bed so that I think they want you at a 60-degree angle, to be in Trendelenburg. And it's just literally gravity is supposed to help hold things in. And so as much as I could, I was in Trendelenburg at home. I was basically like that from about 19 weeks, until about 22 and a half weeks. I went to appointments every week. Basically, things seemed stable. Things seemed okay. They pretty much were like, you're going to be in this for the long haul. Like, you're going to be on bed rest at home for a very long time. You might end up having them 34 weeks or something, but it's just going to be a long time. So when I went in at 22 and a half weeks, things seemed great. I went home, and a few days later, I noticed that I had just some discharge in the toilet, and I was a little confused. I mean, because just when you're pregnant, you have lots of other things happen, and this was more than I had ever seen. So I talked to my mom, and she's like, you know what, you should probably call if you're not comfortable. And I didn't want to be that person that goes in. I'm like, I think I'm in labor. But I called, and they were like, well, I mean, of course they're going to say, we want to see you. And so I'm thinking, like, I'm going to go in. They're going to be like, you're fine. So I went in, and the nurse put me back there, and they checked to make sure my water hadn't broken or anything like that, and it hadn't. And the doctor on call came down and checked my cervix, and she's like, you're actually 1 centimeter dilated, which was shocking, because I didn't feel any pain or anything like that. So they admitted me and said, you know what, you can be 1 centimeter dilated like the rest of your pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Like it would be fine. It's not ideal, but that could happen. So we're just going to see, make sure you're not going into labor or anything. So they put me up into the room, and the on-call doctor came in and was talking to me a little bit later, and basically, was like, you know what, you're not having contractions. Like, there's no need for me to check your cervix again. It's just going to aggravate things at this point. And literally while she was talking to me, I was watching the contraction monitor start to move. So I had started having contractions, and I was not even 23 weeks pregnant. So I started freaking out, and she said, okay, I'm going to have to check your cervix now. I just want to, make sure you're not more dilated. And she reached up and was just like, you know what, you're still about 1 centimeter, maybe a little bit more dilated, but I can actually feel the baby's head at this point. So she's like, we're going to have to kind of make some decisions. You're going to have to make a decision on if the babies were to come today, do you want us to do life-saving measures? And I'm like, absolutely. And she's like, at this point, there is a very good chance that things wouldn't go your way with them not even being 23 weeks. Like, there's just a good chance that you could try to do life-saving measures and things could be horrible. And she's like, and where you are, we can't admit babies underneath 27 weeks. So we'd have to transfer you or transfer the babies and leave you here. She's like, so you've got to make a decision basically right now. Do you want to go to a different hospital where if you had the babies, they could do life-saving measures? And so me and my husband were like, absolutely. So they transferred me by ambulance to a different hospital. I actually ended up at Overland Park Regional Hospital, and I was in antepartum there for about a week and a half. When I first got there, I was still having contractions, and it was super weird because I actually didn't feel them. They were very low. They were just very low in my stomach, and it was just tightening of my stomach. It wasn't painful at all. The doctor came in and checked my cervix again. I mean, I felt like I get my cervix checked a million times that night. They actually did an ultrasound that night too. And she's like, you know what? The babies look great. They're doing fine. We're just going to basically put you on magnesium, and we're going to try to get these contractions stopped. So they put me on magnesium, and basically it just makes you feel like you have the flu and you're not allowed to get out of bed at all. So they have to catheterize you. And so they put me on fluids and magnesium and catheterized me and said, we'll check back, and you'll have to be on magnesium for at least 48 hours. And the hope is that the magnesium will stop the labor. And they gave me a steroid shot, and they said, this will help to try to develop the lungs if, God forbid, you go into labor and have the babies.
All right. So by now, CBD is all over the map, and there's tons of amazing health benefits for using CBD. It can be anti-inflammatory. It can help with anxiety. It can help you sleep. There's so many benefits for using great CBD, but finding a good CBD company can be really hard. But that is why I love Hemp Fusion. They're unlike all the other brands who just offer CBD, because they have CBD infused with omegas and terpenes and other natural ingredients to help you feel 100%. And the reason why they do that is they understand how CBD works with the body. They know that when they combine it with these other nutrients, it helps you so much more. And it helps with stress and sleep and energy, which is something that we could all use a little bit more of. I'm always in need of more sleep, that's for sure. And our bodies already make cannabinoids. Did you know that? And plant-based CBD helps naturally balance your body out. Everything that Hemp Fusion does adds to a better product, and that makes a better day for you. They have their products both available online, and look out for stores because they do have them at some retailers near you, and they ship anywhere in the U.S. And right now we have a special offer for you. Use promo code MAMAS for 20% off your first order and free shipping at hempfusion.com. That's promo code MAMAS at hempfusion.com. Get Hemp Fusion shipped anywhere in the U.S. today.
So within 48 hours, my labor had actually stopped, and everybody was giving me hope and making me feel like, you're just going to be in antepartum for 8 more weeks, hopefully. And, at least get to 28 weeks. Like, that was the goal. They were like, at least get to 28 weeks. Like, that would be a lot better than where you are. So every day the head nurse or the NICU team would come down, and I don't know if they meant to do this, but they would give me a paper that would basically say, like, here's where you are developmentally today. Like, here's the likelihood of survival today if you had your twins today. So, I mean, nothing like the anxiety of every day being like, I have 1% more of a chance. So, by July 2nd, so I had been in the hospital about a week at this point. I was thinking, gosh, I'm just going to be here forever. And I was just feeling kind of bad. I was just feeling kind of crampy and just kind of cold. And I didn't even think anything of it. I was just like, I'm just going to go to bed. They noticed that contractions had actually started. And it took them a while to notice it because, again, they were very, very low. And when they had me hooked up to contraction monitors 24/7. But when I told them, I feel like I'm having contractions, and they moved the monitor down to my lower stomach, they then could measure them. So I was contracting very low, and I was starting to have back labor. And the contractions were getting closer and closer together, and I was just in a lot of pain. And so they put me back on magnesium, and eventually, I think it was July 2nd was when they actually stopped. It was that night they got them stopped, and I was like, I'm just going to go to bed. Like, I'm feeling so much better now that the contractions have stopped. And the nurse came in at that point because I was on magnesium, and I begged her to let me use a bedpan instead of being catheterized because it is horrible. And I said, things are just, I feel like my water has broken. And so they did a dip stick to see if it had. And she's like, it really hasn't. But she's like, honestly, it looks like you might have some infection coming out. And so she called the doctor on call, and he's like, take her temperature. And they did. And I had a fever. So the doctor on call spoke with my perinatologist, and they decided to do a C-section that night because I clearly had some sort of infection that was compromising to the babies. So on July 3rd at 1 a.m, they took me in for a C-section and did the spinal. And my biggest worry was like having a panic attack on the table. To be honest, I thought I'm not going to get through this. Like I didn't want a C-section anyway, just because I was just scared. And I thankfully did get through it. And the doctors, when the babies came out, said, they're breathing on their own, and they said, this is amazing. They're breathing on their own. And one was 1 pound, 10 ounces, and the other was 1 pound, 12 ounces. And they didn't have to intubate them right away, which was pretty incredible. Because with babies, they were 24 weeks and 4 days gestation when I had them. And with babies that young, they usually cannot breathe at all on their own. So they usually need to be intubated pretty quickly. I think at that point I had 2 rounds of steroids, so that was helpful. But they pretty much whisked them straight off to the NICU. And they asked my husband, do you want to go over, take pictures? And do you want to go up to the NICU with the babies? And I just begged him. I'm like, please don't leave me. I'm so scared. Like, please don't leave me here. And looking back, I'm kind of sad that he didn't get to go off, but I felt like I really needed somebody in that moment just because I was so scared. So they whisked the babies off to the NICU, and there is not a whole lot sadder than going into mother-baby unit without baby. So I went to mother baby and, got to see everybody else have their babies and be wheeled into mother baby and hear the babies all night long. And meanwhile, mine were in the NICU. And I think what was harder, so they let me go up there that night. They wheeled me up. I had a spinal, so they wouldn't let me out of bed, but they wheeled my bed up there just to see the babies. And they looked like little aliens. Their skin was translucent, and they had no body fat on them, and their eyes were still sealed shut. And it was just the word that I used was like, they looked like a bird that had fallen out of a nest. Mm-hmm. And, it was just surreal. It was surreal to see them like that. And to think like, why is this happening? So, they brought me back down to mother baby, and, the next day I finally was able to get out of bed, and I was having a whole lot of pain just from the C-section. And, so they were going to let me go up in a wheelchair, but I still had a fever. So for the next day, they wouldn't let me go up because of my fever. So that was pretty frustrating, but I spent another 5 days in mother baby. And after my fever was gone, I was up there as much as I could. And eventually they let us, I think by day 2 or 3, they let us take the babies out and do skin to skin, which is something that's amazing to do, in general, just if you have a baby. But it was really nice. And literally scientifically proven, like it helps those babies like with their apnea, because they have apnea when they're that young, like when they feel your heart beating, like it helps them to calm down, and you can see the oxygen and you can see their heart rates calm down when they're on you. And it's really cool. So I was able to do that with both of them, and my husband was able to do that. And after 6 days in mother baby, they finally were like, okay, you've got to leave the hospital now. You're no longer a patient. And that was probably the saddest thing, was just having to leave the hospital without my girls.
All right, so you all know that I am now making a video series on preparing your body to try to conceive, and one of the steps is eliminating toxins from your life, and that includes aluminum, parabens, and talc, which is why I love native products, because they already come without those horrible things in them. They're filled with ingredients that are found in nature, such as coconut oil, shea butter, and tapioca starch, which absorbs your sweat. They never test on animals, and they do free shipping and returns. And the best thing is that it works. Making the switch to an all-natural deodorant does not mean that you have to sacrifice on product performance. I've been using Native for several months now and referred it out to other people, and they are like, oh my gosh, I actually don't smell at the end of the day. And I'm just like, you're welcome. I told you. Because I know making that switch can be really hard to find the right one for you. But with Native, I love their citrus blend and their coconut vanilla. Amazing deodorants. I put it on in the morning and I don't smell bad at the end of the day, which is a big deal for me because I am a smelly person. And people love them. They have over 9,000 5-star reviews. They were on the Today Show, in Elle Magazine, Pop Sugar, Refinery 29. They are all over the map, which means that they have such an amazing product. And it's ingredients that you know. And since they are aluminum free, that makes them safe and effective for your girls entering puberty, for mamas. And they have something for everyone. They have men's products. They have toothpastes. They have things if you have sensitive skin. They're such an amazing company, and there's no risk to try it. They offer free returns and exchanges. Like I said, I've been using them for a while now, and they are always my go-to referral when people are like, what deodorant should I use? And I'm like, try Native. And for 20% off your first purchase, visit nativedeodorant.com and use promo code Miraculous during checkout. That's 20% off your first purchase at nativedeodorant.com using promo code Miraculous during checkout.
So I visited every single day, and pretty much just for the next 4 months just was there, pretty much all day, taking turns, holding one baby, holding the other. And we celebrated all the little milestones. And, one of my favorite things to do was to call at night. I would call in when I was pumping, because I was trying really hard just to give them breast milk, just because I really, I thought, if there's anything I can do, like, this is what I can do. So I did everything I could just to pump all the time. And so I would call them every time at night that I pumped, and they would give me updates on what was going on. And after the 8 o'clock update, like, they would always weigh them. So it was cool every night to hear, oh, they grew 2 ounces, or, just how much they had grown, or what their length was, or anything like that. So we got to have all sorts of updates, and it was a long journey. We had one of our little girls. She was actually the littler one. She was baby B. She was born at 1 pound, 10 ounces, and 13 inches long. And she had a pneumothorax. I think it was probably within the first 2 weeks. So that was kind of a heartbreaking call to get. They called and they said, we think we might have to intubate. Her name's Hadley. We think we might have to intubate Hadley. Her stats are not able to come back up. We're not really sure what else to do. We're going to try to insert a needle and just drain the air around the lung. But if that doesn't work, we're going to have to intubate her. And so I was actually on my way to the hospital when I got that call. And so I just sat there and prayed and prayed. And by the time I got there, I was expecting to see her intubated, and she wasn't. Once they put the needle in, that air drained around her lung, and she was, of the two, Hadley was she was the smaller one, but she was actually probably the stronger of the two, as far as, like, she had a pretty consistent NICU journey. She didn't have any sort of brain bleeds or any sort of scares, like with her air. She never, from that point on, really didn't have a time where they were thinking they'd have to intubate her. And then Harper, my baby A, who was the bigger one, when they had delivered her via C-section, they actually noticed that she had some infection within her amniotic sac. And they sent off both my placentas, because my girls are fraternal, and they found out that I had enterococcus, which is similar to, it's like a type of strep, but it's not group B strep. And I mean, there's no way to know how I got it, probably just from being in the hospital, which is such a catch-22. But so they found that, and there's a very specific type of antibiotic to treat that. So I had to make sure I was on that antibiotic, and they put both the girls on that antibiotic anyway. Just they do that naturally with babies born that early, just to make sure that they don't have infection. So she had a little rougher of a journey. Both of them were not intubated at birth, but within about a week, Harper had, she had a pretty bad apnea spell, and they had to intubate her. And she was intubated for close to a month, while she was in the NICU that first month of life. And it's funny, joking with one of her NICU doctors now, he's like, I thought we were never going to get her unintubated, just because no matter what they tried, like they tried weaning the oxygen level. I mean, they tried everything. But she was stubborn, and she still is, but she would pull out the intubation. She loved to do that on my husband. He would be holding her, and she would just yank it out of her neck. And so all the doctors would come running in. And so it was pretty scary. And eventually they decided she's been on it way too long. So they started a steroid to attempt to get her off the intubation. And finally, she was able to come off of it. So we were thinking, oh my gosh, she's going to come home on oxygen. Like, she's going to be our last one home. Like, she's going to be here in the NICU forever. Because Hadley seemed to be just like making leaps and bounds over her. Hadley was at this point just getting huge. Like, she was almost a half a pound bigger than her. And, so at about 100, and I think it was at 99 days, we took both girls. It was finally at the end of our NICU journey. They had done car seat tests to make sure they'd be okay in a car seat. And they had done brain scans, and they didn't have any brain bleeds. And they had done kind of all the tests. And we were finally at the point where they were on just a little bit of oxygen. But it was what they call room air, but it was just oxygen enough just to give them what they called a whiff. And we roomed in with them that night, because we were thinking we were going to get to take them home. And they said, if you take them home on oxygen, like, we can let them go home, because they were taking every food by mouth, and they weren't needing a feeding tube anymore. So we agreed, it's been a long journey. We can handle them being on oxygen at home. Mm-hmm. So we roomed in with both of them. We thought we were going to get to take them both home. And that night, Hadley had reflux all night long. And every time she would reflux, she would choke. And she would have an apnea spell or a Brady spell, and the nurse would have to run in, and it was just all night long. And I just looked at my husband, and I'm like, we can't take her home, babe. I'm like, this is so bad. Like, I don't trust myself enough to be able to do something at home if something were to happen. And, I told the nurse by the next morning, the doctor and the nurse came in. I'm like, we can't take Hadley home. And they were like, well, duh. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're not going to send her home like this, because one of the NICU things they have, which I found is pretty universal, at least in this area, is you have to be 7 days, what they say, spell free. So that's one of the ways to get out of the NICU, is they cannot have a bradycardia or an apnea spell for 7 days straight, because usually if they've gone that far, they're not going to have it at home. So our time clock started over for her, but Harper did great. And so everybody just joked and laughed, because Harper was like the last one you would think to leave the NICU, but she actually was the first first to get out. So we took Harper home at 99 days, and we visited Hadley every day. We got to bring back Harper, which was nice. Her being on oxygen was a big pain, honestly, because they have to bring in a huge oxygen tank into your house, and you just have this massively long 20-foot oxygen cord that everywhere you go with the baby, you've got this cord. And also she came home on an apnea monitor. If they're on oxygen, they have to have a monitor. So you had to carry that. And that had to be plugged in half the time. And so, we visited Hadley every day and had to bring the portable oxygen to visit. And, finally at about 107 days, well, before that, I should mention, we just begged the doctors. We were like, clearly this is not working. Can we put her on a reflux medication? Could we do anything to try to get her to leave here? Because her reflux is what's keeping her here. And they finally agreed so we did two things. We thickened her feeds, which she was on straight breast milk, and so was Harper. But we thickened her feeds with something called gel mix. At the time, it was the only thickener for breast milk. And we started her on, I think it was Prilosec. We started her on a reflux med. And seriously, within 48 hours of starting that, she was fine. And I was just kicking myself for not having asked long before that. But they really try to avoid any sort of reflux medication in the NICU, because messing with those stomach juices really can make you a lot more susceptible to illness. And that's the last thing little NICU babies need. So finally, at 108 days, we got to room in. We've got to bring Harper and room in with both Hadley and Harper, and they both did great, and she wasn't having her reflux anymore. So we finally got to take her home, and it was just a journey, because we still, after you leave the NICU, you would think oh, you're done. But we literally got a folder with hospital visits and doctor follow-ups and specialists that we needed to visit. And so we had just this folder of all these different visits that we had. And our NICU was amazing. They set up all those appointments for us. And I am a teacher, so I actually had to take off half of a year. One, because I had the kids in the NICU, but also because I had to be home with them for the first 12 weeks. I wanted to be home, actually have them at home. So, for the next 4-ish months before I went back to school, we had a lot of doctor visits. And in about a month after we got home from the NICU, we went to their NICU follow-up, and they said, well, let's just take off. I think it was a week after we got back from the NICU. They said, let's take off the apnea monitor. And then about a month after, they said, okay, let's take off the oxygen. Let's see how they do in the office. And they did fine. And I was a nervous wreck, because, going through a NICU journey like that and literally seeing your baby turn purple over and over again, I just kept looking for signs. And my husband and I, we were like, we've been through the CPR class. We know exactly what to do. They kept reminding us too, if you start to get scared, if it's within 60 days, they will let the babies come back to the NICU. You don't have to go to the PICU or anything like that. So, they got off oxygen and they did great. And we were very, very fortunate and very, very lucky, because, throughout our time there, we had a lot of friends that were not so fortunate who had babies just as early or even later than us. Those babies, some of them ended up with brain bleeds or the big thing was always major eating issues that would sometimes result in needing to come home on a feeding tube or needing to have a G tube inserted. And we thankfully didn't experience that. The hardest parts that we were experiencing once we got home were some of the reflux, and Harper actually had she was aspirating a little bit, so we had to end up thickening her feeds, but we did a swallow study for her to thicken her feeds. But comparatively, we actually had a much less eventful NICU journey. But yeah, that's kind of my story. It's not for the faint of heart, I can tell you that. Just going back and forth to the hospital for 108 days is not easy.
No, not at all. That had to be such a scary time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think I'm a very faithful person. So from the very beginning, one of the things, my mom, I remember, came in after I had given birth and just was crying and crying. And she was like, what are you going to do? How are you going to get through this? And I said, honestly, at this point, it's just in God's hands. Like, there is literally nothing I can do at this point. And it was just kind of a huge test to my faith, because I could choose to sit and dwell in it and just be depressed every single day, or I could choose to get ready and try my best to get our house ready. And like, we had no nursery ready at this point because, I was put on bed rest at 18 weeks. So we just tried our best to get ready and just hoped and prayed that we would get to bring our babies home. But we were told a lot along the way that, that it's unlikely that you'll be bringing one or both home. And nobody would ever say like, when they go home. It was always like, if they go home at the end of this, or just take it day by day. And so I think that was really hard to hear, just because you want somebody to be like, yeah, when they get home, it's going to be this. And we literally, until we set a day to room in with the girls, like nobody, not any of our nurses said when they go home. And we had some amazing nurses. And one of the best parts, I think, of that hospital and just the NICU journey was that we were able to set primary nurses. So the nurses that knew and loved our girls and that we knew and loved and got along with, we could ask that they be our nurses when they were on shift. So that was really helpful, because it wasn't every time I called, it was always somebody I knew, and it was always somebody that I knew the girls. And that actually proved to be really helpful later, because like in the situation where Harper would like unintubate herself, it was one of our primary nurses that was like, something is off. She does not normally act like this. This is not normal. Or there was another situation that happened too. So it was just, the nurses could say, this is not typical. And they were the ones that were actually telling the doctors, you need to look into this. So it was good health-wise, but it was really good emotionally to have, to feel like if I'm going to leave them with somebody, it's going to be somebody that knows them. So the coolest part, though, is our NICU does a NICU reunion in the fall every year. So the first year they got out, we couldn't go because they were still in the NICU. But we went at their 1 year. So it was right after they turned a year old. And then we just went in September. Now they're 2. So they turned 2 over the summer, and they're talking and running and jumping. And we went to the NICU reunion and got to see a lot of our nurses that took care of them. And they just couldn't believe how big they are. And they were going in all the bounce houses, and they got to see some of their doctors that took care of them, and the neonatologist that actually helped deliver them and was on them the whole time was there. And it was just really cool because they got to see the people that took care of them, and they got to see how much growth that they've made. So it was cool. We call them our little miracles because they're just little miracles.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, just your strength through it. And like you said, your faith getting you through that. I mean, when I hear your story, it's like you have to hold on to something.
Yeah, you do. I mean, if I wanted to, I knew it would be so easy for me to just dwell and just want to stay home and just have no hope. And there were a couple times along the way that I would break down, but I knew like I couldn't live in that, because if I live in that, like, it's just going to be, I'm going to be in such poor health, and I need to be strong for them. And honestly, some of the strongest people I know are babies that have been in the NICU. Mm-hmm. Like the amount, if you just think of like the amount of fighting that they've done, like before they were technically even supposed to have been born, like all those NICU babies are just fighters, and the parents are too. Like it's really cool to bond with other parents that have been through similar experiences. And I've been able to be there for some women, especially that have had similar situations or have been in the hospital for twins. And so I've been acting kind of as a mentor for people who have dealt with similar situations, because I've been there and I can give you some tips and tricks that helped for me. And staying off of Google was probably the most helpful.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest things I took away was, you don't have to be one of the statistics. You know, they are very number oriented in the NICU, and this is how likely you are to be able to get out of here. Like once they're at this gestation, and this is how likely, and, you know, statistics are made every day, and I can't just dwell on like, we only have a 50% chance of survival, which is what we were told when the girls were born that early. And we were told if they just make it to 28 weeks, it like jumps drastically to like 80% or something. But I couldn't live by a number. And I thought, you know, if this is the only time I'm going to spend with my girls, then I'm going to spend it fully immersed in just holding them rather than just crumbling and not being able to be strong for them. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And I know tons of mamas who are listening can relate. And we also want to thank you to all of the doctors and nurses and staff that are there for these families who have babies that are born premature and who are in the NICU every single day visiting their babies or making those late night phone calls while you're breastfeeding, because you guys make such a big difference to these families.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, like those nurses, I mean, the doctors obviously are so smart and so helpful, but man, we would not have made it through without our NICU nurses and just their willingness to be able to accept that I'm that panicked mom that's going to call 3 times a night. And they would answer with a smile on their face and say, "Oh my gosh, Hadley just did the funniest thing." Or one of our nurses was like, "Oh, her feet were so stinky, we had to give her a foot bath." I mean, it's just things like that you're just like, "Oh my gosh, thank you for that laugh." But man, it takes a special heart to go into nursing. So I can't help but think of all those nurses during Prematurity Awareness Month.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much. And thank you, Katie, so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Again, I'm just so thankful for the people that come on and just share so openly with us their lives. And speaking of sharing openly, Vito's going to come on next week because we have a couple of things that we want to share with you guys and talk to you about, a few things that we've been going through. And I debated on whether to share some things, but I just value so much transparency in the people who come on here and so selflessly share their lives and their stories with us. So I want to do the same with you. So next week, Vito will be on the end of the podcast with me to just share some stuff that we've been going through. So look forward to that. There's also a few episodes that are getting changed around. I know I said last week that Dr. Axe was going to be coming on this month. We had to reschedule, so he'll be on next month, but he's still coming on, and I'm super excited about that episode. Next week, I have an amazing author coming on who talks about how family trauma is inherited through generations, how it's science-backed, and ways that we can break the cycle in our families. It is so important to be aware of the traumas that have been passed through, the triggers that may show up in you and your children, and how you can be that person, be the catalyst for change in your family. So Mark Wolin is going to be coming on and sharing his book with us, sharing his research and some tools for us to learn from. You guys, it is Thanksgiving week. Man, we have so much to be thankful for this year, and I know all of you do as well. It is such an amazing time to be with family, to be grateful, to look around and just count your blessings. And I know that that's what we'll be doing this year. We're going to be driving down to Texas to spend time with our family. We're bringing Hutch along so he can meet the kids, which will be so much fun. I'm also going to be posting a blog about some fun holiday mocktails that you can make, because there's always fun holiday cocktails, but part of my preparing to try to conceive is cutting alcohol out of my life. And but I still want to have fun and enjoy parties, so having a fun mocktail is an option. So look out for that blog post that will be coming out. And again, if you are not subscribed, subscribe to this podcast, share it with people who you know would love it and find valuable information in it. Make sure that you join our Facebook group, follow the Instagram page, and the Twitter account. I am so thankful for you guys, for your support, for giving me feedback, for helping me get on amazing guests, for sharing this with your family and friends. I value you so, so much, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear next week's episode. Be safe over this Thanksgiving week, and I love you and talk to you soon.
This podcast is brought to you by Wave Podcast Network. Check out all of our shows, including the Brain Candy Podcast, I Don't Get It, Coffee Convos, and Let's Talk About It.